I live alone in a very small 2-bedroom house in my town. It's a quiet suburban town on the outskirts of a large city. My dating life has been pretty hectic for the past couple years, having bad experiences with relationships. I took a year off, trying to focus on myself and not let anyone new into my life. While this did help me feel better most of the time, it didn't help with some things. This happened just a few months ago, and it still has me really shaken up. It started one night when I got home from work. I was upstairs, changing out of my work clothes, when I heard a knock at the door. I dressed up and went to the front door, looking out the peephole, but I didn't see anyone on my porch. I opened the door and stuck my head out, looking around, but there was still no one there. I closed the door. I thought it must just be a prank, or maybe someone that had the wrong house. I went about my night, forgetting about it. The next morning, though, I woke up to a knock at the door again. It was 6 a.m., which was a bit earlier than I had wanted to get up, so I stayed in bed. An hour or so later, I checked to see if there was a package delivered, but there was nothing. That's when I started to feel uneasy, knowing that there was someone knocking at my door at different times of the day for seemingly no reason. I made sure everything was locked up before I went to work. I told a few of my friends at work about the strange knocking, and they all seemed to think it was really creepy, but nobody had any ideas on what to do about it. I left work that night, even more uneasy. Driving down my neighborhood road, a part of me didn't even want to go home, because I was worried that the knocking would continue, or even escalate to something much worse. When I pulled in front of my house, though, I saw a figure standing at my front door. I stopped the car, halfway in the driveway. The person heard my brakes skid and immediately ran away. They went down the sidewalk and around one of my neighbors' houses, running off into the woods. I stayed in my car, too scared to get out. In short, I called the police and an officer came to talk to me, but there was nothing that could be done without a way to identify the person, and they hadn't necessarily done anything wrong yet. The officer left, making me feel no safer than before. 2 more days went by, but there were no more knocks on my door, and I never saw anyone standing by my house during those days. Then, on a Wednesday after work, I got home at 7, parking in my garage and walking inside. I went right upstairs and changed clothes, then went back down to make dinner. As I flicked on the hallway light, I saw a man sitting at the table in my kitchen, just 10 to 15 feet away from me. He was already looking at me, and it was then that I recognized his face as that of my ex-boyfriend from the year before. He had no emotion, just looked dead inside. I was so scared, I wasn't sure what to do. He calmly asked me to sit at the table with him, but I was frozen, standing in the hallway. He said he just wanted to talk to me, and that he wanted my forgiveness. From our short, 1-month relationship last year, I knew he was very unstable, and that was the biggest reason for ending things. The whole time he was talking, reciting this memorized speech of some sort, I was thinking of any possible way to get out of this safely. All I could think of was to run back upstairs and call the police. So, that's what I did. I sprinted up the stairs and locked the door behind me, dialing 911 as he banged on the door, screaming at me to let him in. I was in tears, hearing slight cracks in the wood as he fiercely kicked and punched the door. Then he stopped and started talking again in a creepy, peaceful manner. I told him I would talk to him outside, and that I needed to feel safe if we were to get back together. He paused for a moment, then agreed. I heard his footsteps walking downstairs. Minutes later, police showed up. I heard an officer yell for him to stop, but he was able to get away. Not for long, though. They arrested him a day later at his apartment. The charges piled on as they found evidence of stalking on his phone. He had hundreds of pictures of my house, including ones of me getting home from work, checking the mailbox, and even some looking through the windows into my living room. The pictures were all taken within the last 3 months though, so it's not clear why he started stalking me so long after our breakup. This was definitely the most disturbing thing I've ever been through. I worked the closing shift at my local grocery store during my gap year between high school and college. I was a cashier, so I interacted with people pretty much all day long. After around 7 o'clock though, there would only be a few customers an hour, and during the last hour of 9 p.m., I'd maybe get 2 or 3 customers. Then I had a few things to do, like refill the bags and clean up the counters, and would leave the store at 10:15 every night. The lead, who also worked in the front end or cashier department with me, had to stay a bit later to empty the registers and count the money, so I'd always be the only one leaving at that time of night. One day, after a regular shift at work, I clocked out and walked to my car in the parking lot. It was late, and the only cars in the lot were from the few coworkers still in the store, but someone's car was parked right next to mine and had their headlights on. I walked around to my car and got in, trying to get situated quickly, but I couldn't help but look over and see who it was. When I turned my head, the man in the car was staring right at me. I quickly shifted my eyes forward, but I think that only made things more weird, knowing he was likely still looking at me. I put the car in drive and got out of there. The next day, I was talking with one of the managers at the store and brought up the man in the parking lot. I asked if maybe they hired someone new for overnight stalking, but they said no. I mentioned the weird encounter in the parking lot, and we both laughed about it, thinking it was just some coincidence of some sort that someone was parked there. I was off the next day, but the day after, I worked the closing shift again. Everything was fine and normal up until 8. I hadn't had a customer in 15 minutes, so I was kind of just looking off into the store when I noticed a man walking around. He had nothing in his hands and no cart or basket. He was just walking up and down the aisles, aimlessly. Once I took notice, I saw him glance over at me several times. I thought I looked weird for watching him, even though I was trying to be discreet about it, so I shifted my eyes elsewhere and tried to not be creepy. A few minutes later, I saw the man in the corner of my eye. He was standing in the aisle directly in line with my checkout lane. I looked over, and the man was facing the shelves, but his head was turned and he was staring at me. It was then that I recognized his face and eyes as the man I'd seen in the parking lot a couple days ago. A cold rush went through me as I looked away, but I could see him in the corner of my eye, still standing there. Once he finally walked out of the aisle, I lost track of him and didn't see him in the store anymore. I was the only cashier, so if he had to buy anything, he would have to come to my register. It was 9 o'clock already, and by 9:30, I was sure he had to have left. I had one more customer come through, and then it was time to start closing up. I turned off the register and refilled the bags at all the stations, then asked my lead if they needed help with anything. They declined and said I was good to go, so I headed out. The parking lot was mostly empty as usual, and I was relieved to see that nobody had parked next to my car. I walked steadily across the lot until a sudden beam of light blinded me. Someone turned on their bright headlights facing right in front of me. I picked up the pace as I heard the car start driving, coming toward me pretty quickly. I got to my car and got in, just as the other car sped up to me, then braked abruptly right in front of my car. My heart was racing. I locked the doors and hurried to start my car, as a man got out and ran up to my door. He pulled on the handle aggressively, trying to open it. He was rushing, testing the back door too, but then he quickly got back in his car and sped away. I was horrified and in shock. My hands were so shaky, I wasn't sure I could even drive. I called the police right away, thinking the man was probably the same man I'd seen staring at me. But all of the security cameras weren't clear enough to make out his face or the license plate, so the case went stale pretty quickly. I haven't seen him since that incident, but I quit my job at the grocery store soon after, because I would still have rushes of fear go through me every time I left work at night. I'm a 22-year-old male going to a large university. I'm not a very talkative person, so relationships have always been a struggle for me. During my junior year of college, I started using Tinder to hopefully have more success in finding someone. I knew the app wasn't an ideal way of meeting people, but it felt easier for me than just going up to someone and talking to them. But after a few weeks, something really strange started coming up. Something that I never imagined would happen to me. During the first week or two, things were going about as expected. I matched with and talked to a few girls, but nothing really seemed to click with any of them. Then I matched with a girl named Natalia. Based on her profile, she went to the same university as me and had a lot of the same interests. We started chatting right away, and a few days later, I asked her out on a coffee date at a nearby cafe. I was really excited, and on the day of, I walked down to the cafe and saved a table for us. I texted her that I was there, but 30 minutes went by and she still hadn't shown. She wasn't responding anymore either. I was super bummed out because I really thought we were a good match. I waited another 15 minutes, then walked out. During the walk back to campus though, a car pulled over on the side of the road next to me. A man rolled down the window and called out to me. "Hey, need a ride back to campus?" I responded, saying no thanks, and kept walking. The guy drove off before I could even think much about it. Why would someone just ask a random person who's walking if they needed a ride? And, even more disturbing, how did he know I was walking back to campus? I thought maybe he just made the assumption that I was a college kid, and since I was heading in the direction toward the campus, that's where he thought I was headed. But still, it was a strange encounter. I got back to my dorm room and took the day off from Tinder. I made some food, relaxed, and tried to not let it get to my head. A few days later, maybe even a whole week later, I went to my morning classes, then had work right after. It was only a 10-minute walk off campus. During this walk, less than halfway to my work, a car stopped next to me on the road. It looked familiar, and I almost instantly recalled it as being the same car that stopped by me a week ago when I was walking back from the cafe. The guy rolled his window down, but I kept walking, trying to ignore him. A few seconds later, I heard the car door open and footsteps quickly approaching behind me. I looked back, seeing him running at me. I sprinted down the sidewalk, which had nobody nearby to help. My adrenaline was pumping. I don't even remember ever running out of breath. At some point, he stopped chasing me and turned back, getting in his car. I continued running for a minute, turning down a different path and taking the long way to work. I thought about calling the cops, but I had nothing to give them aside from a basic description of his car. But as I walked up to my place of work, I saw his car right outside the building. How did he know where I worked? I stayed out of sight and called the cops, hoping they'd come quick enough to catch him before he figured it out. And luckily, they did. Turns out the guy was using Tinder to try and lure me into his trap. His account was under the name Natalia, so that explained how he knew so much. But I never said where I worked or the route I took to walk to work. So, he must have been stalking me for a whole week to have known where I worked and the path I took to get there. He made no statements on what he planned to do once he got to me.